I'm probably going to say a few things in this video that people will find controversial. We just had Remembrance Sunday, today is Armistice Day, and generally this is a time in the year when people look back, reflect upon and remember those who died for us, whether it was in World War I, World War II or the various conflicts since. But in reality, this is just a time of the year where people become massive hypocrites. Hypocrisy rules remembrance. And I'll tell you why. It's because if those soldiers who died, say during the Second World War, could see what England had become today, they would be mortified. They would be aghast. And on the other hand, if those soldiers were alive today, holding the views that they did actually hold and expressing them, the people laying wreaths at the cenotaph like Keir Starmer and Ed Davey would call them far right and racist and fascist. So it's just one big hypocrisy fest. It really, really is. And I'm going to talk about all of that in this video, but first there's a clip that I want to show you. It's a 100-year-old veteran who went onto a news show to tell the presenters what he thinks of modern Britain and whether the sacrifice of his brothers was really worth it. Have a look at this. Well, I thought that I would be including a clip here from Good Morning Britain, in which two of the presenters, one of them being Adil Ray, speak to a 100-year-old veteran about whether the sacrifice that he and his brothers made for modern Britain was actually worth it. Now, I can't do that because I've already uploaded this video once and I got a copyright strike from ITV, so clearly they don't want me to use that footage, which is pretty unfortunate from a news organisation, right? But I'm not going to try and fight the copyright claim, so it is what it is. Instead, I'll just describe to you roughly what happened. One of the presenters asks him, what does Remembrance Day mean for you? And he just goes into a long spiel about how it really, really wasn't worth it. The sacrifice that he and his brothers made. And he talks about rows and rows of stone crosses, all of the people that gave their lives. It just wasn't worth it for what modern Britain has become. And then there's also a really strange moment where after he said this, Adil Ray, the other presenter, jumps in and says, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean modern Britain isn't worth it? Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you the clip, but if you do want to go and see it, it's available on X. You can find it quite easily. Really annoying. I know, I suspect most of you have seen this clip anyway. This is why I prefer GB News and Talk TV, because they will actually let you use their footage as long as you're actually talking about the topic and you're just using snippets, but ITV don't like that. It is what it is. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably find that clip absolutely heartbreaking, but actually it's a really common perception amongst those who fought in and survived the Second World War. It's so common that there are numerous written accounts of people in the 1990s and the early 2000s just in total despair at what had become of Britain. And you can find loads of different interviews which are basically saying the exact same thing. I'll put another one in here for you to look at.
I sometimes think now that nowadays, when you look at certain things that go on in this country, one does tend to think, good God, what did I fight for? I thought we were fighting for a better world and a better country. But the way the country goes now sometimes, I wonder if we didn't waste our time a bit.
Now, going back to that first clip, Alec, the 100-year-old D-Day veteran, references fighting for our freedoms, but being sad that our freedoms just seem to be getting progressively eroded, and he's totally right. Our freedoms have been getting eroded ever since the Second World War, and that clearly is not what he fought for. But what's fascinating is that Adil Ray, one of the presenters on that show, is very quick to jump on Alec, isn't he? He says, what do you mean? What do you mean? How could you doubt that this multicultural modern Britain isn't worth fighting for? And I just find this fascinating because Adil Ray, that presenter, is currently in hot water for suggesting that perhaps Sharia law would be a really great thing for the West. Listen, Adil, this might come as a bit of a surprise to you, but Alec and his friends did not storm the beaches of Normandy so that we could have Sharia law in the Western world. Okay, that's not why he did it. That might come as a bit of a shocker to you, but that's simply the reality. And I really feel sorry for these D-Day veterans and these World War II veterans, because they've got to be sat there thinking, why did me and my friends and my brothers storm the beaches of Normandy, liberate France by pouring our blood into European soil, only to watch the French allow hundreds of thousands of undocumented men cross from their shores into Britain? Why are the French so ungrateful to the sacrifice that Brits and Americans made to liberate France? Right? That's a question that the French are going to have to answer. But if you're a D-Day veteran, or if you're a World War II veteran, you've got to be looking at this situation just thinking, what on earth, what the hell is going on here? And as for our own government, the situation's no better, is it? Because whilst we've got veterans sleeping rough on the streets, in some cases dying of hypothermia, our government will take those illegal migrants that France has sent to us and put them in hotels. Paid for, of course, by our taxes. So remind me again how exactly we're honouring and remembering our war dead and our warriors who have survived. How are we doing that? Well, we're not, are we? We're not. We're just spitting on their memory. That's what we're doing. Now, here's where I get a little bit controversial. I saw this meme posted online and it basically said, if you're being a bigoted dickhead about minorities, you clearly forgot. The backdrop of the meme is some Remembrance Day stuff, some poppies and a British soldier. And the implication here, quite clearly, is that millions of Englishmen and British men more generally fought for minority rights. That's what they were fighting for, which is completely absurd. There were no minorities in England because it was a 99.99% white country, and there was no concept of minority rights. That simply is not what they were fighting for. I'll tell you what they were fighting for. They were fighting because they did not want foreigners in their country, specifically Germans. They didn't want to be invaded by the Germans. That's what they were fighting for deep down. They were fighting for the future of England and the future of the English people, or in the case of Scots, the future of the Scottish people, Welsh people, right? They were fighting for their own people, for their own nation, and for that future. They were not fighting for minority rights. They were not fighting in the hope that one day millions of people would come from India, Pakistan, and Africa into Britain. That simply is not true. You know this, and I know this. So deliberately trying to rewrite what our ancestors actually fought for is kind of just spitting on their graves. I really, really do believe that, and I find it very frustrating. I did see a response to this post that I thought was fascinating, and it came from Morgoth. Here's what he said. He said, "My grandfather served in the RAF during World War II and was openly racist and despised immigration. You don't get to retroactively change, our history to portray my ancestors as self-righteous shitlibs for your own convenience." So what is Morgoth saying here? Well, he's saying quite simply, you don't get to change retroactively the views of the good guys of World War II to pretend that they actually held your views, to pretend that the guys in England in 1942 crossing into Europe to fight were actually multicultural, woke liberals. That's just not the case. So far from it. I mean, think about this. Anyone who's got a grandparent or had a grandparent who was born in the 1920s or 1930s knows, deep down in reality, that they're a bit racist. My grandfather also fought in Europe during the Second World War. And now that he's gone, I will tell you very openly, he was a bit racist. I'm not condoning their racism. I'm not saying their racism was a good thing, far from it. What I'm saying is you don't get to retroactively change their views to make them into multicultural woke-tards just because it suits your, modern day perspective. They weren't. They didn't agree with you, and in fact they would be completely repulsed by your political views and what you have done to this country, as the very few survivors have quite clearly voiced. That's just the reality. Okay, the good guys did not share your worldview. It's as simple as that. I mean, to be totally honest, pretty much nobody back in the 1940s shared your worldview. Your worldview is a very modern phenomenon, which I hope comes to an end pretty soon. I'll finish on this one final note. I think that if you went back to the 1930s with a time machine and you showed the soldiers who would go on to fight what the future of England and the future of Britain would look like, most of them would not have done so. If you could show them that in 2025, England would only be about 65% English, that in London, it would only be about 30% English, and not much better in Birmingham, so our two biggest cities, I don't think that they would have fought. I don't think that they would have been willing to risk their lives for this future. That the victory the best possible thing that they could hope for was this. They just wouldn't have done it. I really believe that. I don't think you would have been able to motivate those men to go and die in trenches in Europe for what we have now. It's sad, but I think that's totally true. And you can make your own mind up about whether modern Britain is a good thing or a bad thing. But what you don't get to do is pretend retrospectively changing history to make out like the guys in World War II fought so that we could have whatever this modern Britain is, because they didn't. They absolutely did not. I'll leave it there. Look, the demographics are changing in this country very rapidly. I don't think Remembrance Day will be a big thing in 20 or 30 years. I think it will persist to an extent, but I don't think it will stay as much of a big thing as it is now. A lot of the people who've come here have no connection to the Second World War, really. Some of them do, by the way, because they fought in the Empire. But for many of them, you know, particularly from Muslim countries, they actually kind of despise Remembrance Day and the poppies, not necessarily because of the Second World War, but because of many of the recent conflicts like Afghanistan and Iraq. So even if they might actually have some ancestors who fought as part of the British Empire and the British Raj all that time ago, but they still despise Remembrance Day because of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya. So look, the point is this: I don't think Remembrance Day is going to be a big thing going forwards, which is sad, tragic, but there we go. Look, I won't take up any more of your time. Bit of a depressing video. Sorry about that. I'm just sick of seeing all of this hypocrisy from the left and from liberal politicians. This is not what our ancestors died for. So just stop taking their names and their memories in vain, please. That's it. Thank you very much. Please do leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and hopefully I'll see you in a slightly cheerier video in the future.